All right, and welcome to a brand new episode of what did I call this series? Movie convos. I haven't done any of these in about 2 weeks. So,
Voyager to Damned?
no. Like, well, oh, yeah, you were on the only episode of Voyager, Voyage of the Damned. No, Voyager of the Damned. That's
Voyager of the Damned.
yeah, which is still a great title, and I really ought to do more
I
with it.
mean, darned.
I don't think Google and YouTube will oh, one other thing that I should have mentioned. You can't mention the name of the thing that is spreading around that is keeping us all indoors as much as possible. YouTube also filters out any mentions of that word. I've been calling it
I,
the Lou
there
Reed.
are a bunch of other words that came to mind for me to make like really inappropriate jokes with, but I won't.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been calling it the Lou Reed virus because I don't think it'll catch that. And also, I feel like Lou Reed is a disease on humanity. Anyway,
Why the Lou Reed virus? Because so
because
many
it
people are saying that they like it just to sound cool.
no, but I like that joke.
That that's my I think
So
I
I
don't think everyone who says they like Lou Reed really does.
well, the color girls sing do to do.
And
Anyway,
and I'd like for people to name more than that and Sweet Jane as songs that they know by him.
I don't even know that second song. So I'm with
Sweet Jane.
Vernon Smith.
Yes.
Why don't you tell your so you do a few different things. You're a comic book creator. You're an artist. You also created your own children's book.
Yes. And I also illustrate other people's children's books.
Well, we don't like talking about them. We're here to talk about you. But so you've created, well, no, to my knowledge, three creator-owned comic books.
Yes.
Or I guess three creator-owned properties. The first one I can't remember.
The Adventures of Dexter Breakfast.
No, the one before that. You gave me a copy of it.
The Port Authority one?
Port Authority. There you go.
Yeah.
Hard to find, but yeah, you created the Adventures of Dexter Breakfast, which is very Tex Avery.
Yes.
Um,
One of the influence. Tex Avery, Bone, Cerebus, like all kind of,
mhm.
yeah, two cartoon animals in the real world, but set in the Old West.
With a attractive woman,
Yes.
which you could also throw in Howard the Duck
Right.
if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
You also created Hyde, which
Yeah.
is about what is it? Kids under the age of 18, correct?
Yes. One day, everyone over the age of 18 wakes up and wants to kill everyone under the age of 18. And hilarity ensues.
Dead children always make me laugh. Anyway,
Right.
filter that out, YouTube. So anyway, so speaking of dead people, we're here to talk about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Yes. Oh, and currently working on another creative owned.
Oh right, so Bigfoot versus Frankenstein, right? Or do I have that backwards?
Actually, it's just Bigfoot Frankenstein. It's a uh, descendant of Dr. Frankenstein finds a pile of dead Bigfoots and he Frankensteins them together, brings it to life, and goes on a hunt for the people that killed him or them.
Okay, I had this book very wrong.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. So Bigfoot Frankenstein,
Yes,
and
it's a Bigfoot and it's a Frankenstein guy and he's bringing it to life. If that came through clear on your
the
screen.
the rah 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 or the image.
The rah 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 rah. That's actually it's just 32 pages, 5 issues of rah 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 rah.
Okay, do you know when that's coming out? Because obviously, like comics are kind of in a weird limbo at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know like my part is done. The colorist is wrapping up his end, and yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know they're gonna do it digitally first, which I guess is a good time for with everything going on, depending on when shops are able to get back in business.
Hmm.
So no, I have no idea when.
Okay. Well, keep your eye out for Bigfoot Frankenstein. And
Yes.
just so you know, this is a quick aside. I'm looking at you, but because of the direction of my camera, it looks like I'm ignoring you.
Okay.
Just wanted to point that out because it's kind of weird. I keep looking down, like, oh, that looks odd. But
Don't, don't pay
so
attention to me.
so you're a huge Star Trek fan.
I am.
But only certain things. And we won't get too into the weeds with that because you just told me. I know you hate the new movies, but for some reason you like Discovery, which is very much the new movies, but like with a few different characters. But
I only don't like the new movies because they keep retreading the old stuff. When it's like, dude, do new stuff. Like the first movie, totally on board with. I was like, oh, new timeline, which is us. I was like, boom, dude, I'm in. I'm sold. And then like number two, they go back to Khan, and
well, two
number
was
three,
two,
it's like they're listening to Beastie Boys still, and it's like they.
you're misjudging the third one. The third one's the best one. The
I
third one.
haven't rewatched it yet in a while. I just watched one and two like last week, and I'm
Well,
about.
I'm gonna bring up the third one because the third one does so basically Star Trek Into Darkness is the lamest ripoff of Wrath of Khan that you can imagine because it gets everything about Wrath of Khan wrong.
Yeah,
And then the references to Star Trek continuity in the third one, Star Trek Beyond, actually to a degree get it right. But I'm not going to get too into the
I
weeds.
don't think they need to do it. Like it was like why
Well, it's its own movie, but they do have a few references, like the
very end of it
Kirk's birthday is the biggest reference. But
or
um,
the very end of the movie with the ship.
there's that too. But that's not. But the majority of the movie isn't that. The majority of the movie isn't a reference.
Right.
In fact, the biggest reference is to the what is it, '09 Star Trek Beastie Boys thing, and it's actually used
Yeah.
appropriately. But in any case, so it's funny because like everyone regards Wrath of Khan as a brilliant film, and it is. It absolutely is. And I hadn't seen it in years, and I rewatched it about a year ago and bought it immediately because I realized, as good as this film is, you can't really appreciate it until you're like close to 40.
Hmm.
The reason being is that it doesn't
This Kirk
resonate.
older.
Well, the
Like
whole theme of it is getting older and accepting death.
yeah.
It's everything about it. The whole. So I mentioned that they get everything wrong in the first two new Star Trek movies. So it was like somebody had like a checklist of Star Trek. Like, what do we know about Star Trek? Kobayashi Maru. The whole point of the Kobayashi Maru is that Kirk had never accepted that he's going to lose people and that he can fail. That's the only point of the Kobayashi Maru. But you take that and it's just like, oh no, we're just going to do the Kobayashi Maru and people will get that reference.
Right.
And similarly, in Star Trek Into Darkness, which again, horrible film. I've watched it twice. I will never see it again. Um, like they're like, okay, what else do you know about Star Trek? Khan, but you watch Wrath of Khan. Khan's not in that much of this film.
Yeah.
Khan isn't the point. He's a great villain. Ricardo Montalban is fantastic.
Right.
He's not in that much of the film. The film isn't about the Wrath of Khan. Ironically, is not about the Wrath of Khan. It's about Kirk and accepting death.
Yeah. He and Kirk never even share a scene. Like they're never face to face.
That's
like,
true.
in the movie. Like it's always Khan's on the Reliant, Kirk's on the Enterprise, or on Genesis.
Because back in classic Trek, and you can make your decisions as to what encompasses classic Trek, but people stayed on the ship
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. And then in New Trek, well, you can really start with the next gen movies. Everybody's off the ship all the time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in this movie, you're right. Like the only time they have any face to face is the vid screens.
Yeah.
And oh my god, like I knew this film was great, and then as I just turned 40 last year. I'll be 41 in another month, but so I just turned 40.
I just turned 40 11 and a half months ago.
Time passes quickly, and you just realize, oh right, no, I'm basically 41.
Yeah.
but I
I'm
re
5 years older than you are, man.
yeah, you got me by a few years, but not that much. You're what? You're 44,
5.
45. All right, well,
Yeah. Shit,
uh,
6. Just turned 6 like a couple weeks ago. A
okay,
week
so
ago.
you're 5 years older than me, but
Yeah.
yeah, I rewatching it at I might have been 39 when I rewatched it, and I was just like, man, I get this now,
Yeah.
and it it doesn't diminish the film to not get the themes, but it enhances your understanding, like, and it resonates with you as you get older.
Right. But even like, I mean, that was the first Star Trek movie I saw like as a kid. Like I saw it in the theaters when I was in like first or second grade, and I remember coming home and playing Star Trek like with my toys afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what got me into it. Like I had the figures from the first movie, but I mean, I was like 3 or 4 years old when that came out, and so like I don't remember seeing that in the theater. I remember like having the toys like a year or
So,
so later.
ironically, you were just coming out of the womb right after you saw
Yeah,
Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
yeah. Uh, and getting back into it, but yeah, and Wrath of Khan like got me into it as a kid, and then like I would watch like some of the reruns of the original ones whenever they would replay it, and then like Next Gen came out when I was in like sixth or seventh grade, and by that point I was like, ugh, what is it? And like everyone now is like Next Gen's this great thing, but like people didn't like it back then,
Well,
which
I don't know if you could say people didn't like it because it lasted. What was it? 8 seasons, 9 seasons?
right, but they didn't think it would at first, and like there were
Oh
people
yeah.
like protesting me like there's no Star Trek without Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And even I was like, dude, who's this old bald guy? Like I want him to die so Riker, because Riker kind of looks like Kirk, and I want him to take over.
Does he?
I mean
I
it's just
guess he
like
looks more
younger
like
guy with
Kirk
a
than
swoop of
Picard
hair.
does.
But
Uh,
yeah, and so then when it's like when Enterprise comes out and people are like, this stinks, and now Discovery's out and they're like, nah, this stinks, and I'm like, yeah, every time there's a new one.
I guess I'm a huge Deep Space Nine fan, and I know you've never even given it a try.
I
Uh,
did. I watched it all the way through once.
okay, and you still don't like it?
I do, but it's like most of them. It takes, and I had people telling me this when I was watching it, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. And people are like, dude, give it like about 4 seasons. By season 4, it kicks in.
I
And
wouldn't even go that far, but the first season one's rough,
mhm.
and then season two starts to transition. It's season three that it starts to get good. The
Yeah,
problem
but that's the
is,
same as Next Gen. That's the same as Voyager, and that's the same as like Enterprise. Like Enterprise was starting to get it, and it got canceled.
well,
Discovery is stumbling, but like season 2 was pretty cool.
well, the issue is that there's too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to Star Trek. And the
Mm.
reason Deep Space Nine comes together so well is that I won't repeat what I read last night, but what's his name? Brian Fuller, who
Mhm.
was initially the showrunner on Discovery
Right.
and had gotten his start on Voyager, was asked about what it was like working on Voyager, and he explained that the problems between Voyager, which was run by Brandon Braga, and Ivan Stephen Bear, was given not free reign, but a lot more leeway on Deep Space Nine, was that Brandon Braga listened to Rick Berman and how can I put this bluntly, but without using language? Um, Ira Stephen Bear didn't give a foot what Rick Berman thought
Mm.
and told him so. So, but there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen in Star Trek once you get past TOS. And the movies, I think, for whatever reason, don't have those issues. They get to be
Yeah.
whatever they are for the better or the worse. Which is why Star Trek 2 works so well, because I think the writer and the director, they came up with it, they did it, and I can't think of the writer's name, but he directed 6 because he also wrote it. Uh,
Let's see.
yeah, that helps. It also helps if you do your research, but I didn't.
Jack Sowards.
Wait, what?
Screenplay by Jack Sowards.
Well, then who's the director? Maybe I'm thinking of the director. Nick.
Let's see.
Nick.
Producers Harv Bennett, Robert Stalin, directed by Nicholas Mayer.
Nick
Meyer.
Mayer. Nick Meyer. Nick Meyer. Good God. Okay, you all right there?
Yeah, that was just my iPad.
Okay. Uh, so Nick Meyer. But this movie just works on. I mean, it's not a perfect film. There are little things here and there, but it works really well. The theme to it is probably like the number 2 score of any Star Trek film.
Oh, dude.
I'd say.
I hunted that album down in junior high. Like, I wanted a vinyl copy of it. I was like just getting into punk music, which a lot of it was put out on vinyl, and I loved the soundtrack for this movie, and I was even going to animate my own Star Trek cartoon, like on paper, was my idea that I had in 8th grade, and so I wanted that soundtrack, and I called around record stores. I bought I found the soundtrack for Voyage Home, Star Trek 4, and I was like, oh, I know 3 was like 2, so maybe 4 will be like it too. It was nothing like it, but 3 is really similar. But yeah, I hunted that. I found a place like half an hour away. I had to get my mom to drive me there to go get this record for Star Trek 2.
And now you can just go on your computer and have it on Spotify.
Yeah. Oh, and I listen to it probably at least once a week. Like, I'll have it on when I'm working. I've got all the soundtracks and just got it going. It's amazing.
So the movie starts in the Kobayashi Maru with you're introduced to Lieutenant Savick, who is arguably technically the biggest problem in the film, but only because they never explained who she was. Because she's Vulcan, but she's very emotional, and if you look into like the back matter of it, there was a subplot where it turns out she was part Romulan.
Yeah, and that's something I remember my dad telling me that as a kid. Like, I don't know if he read the books. Like, I don't know if he was a Trekkie or something, but like he was like, yeah, she's like half Romulan. And I'm like, how do you know this? And then I thought he was just like full of it. And then like years later, I read that it's like, yeah, no, that was the thing they were gonna do with it.
Well, there's also a subplot in 3 that gets cut out where apparently, 3 and 4 technically, where it turns out that Spock and Savick, not Booch, she got pregnant.
Ponfard.
And Ponfard, and he put a baby in that, and that's why she goes away at the beginning of 4 for no apparent reason.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not why Kirstie Alley went away, but
oh,
yeah.
I heard that was more monetarily based.
Yeah, that's supposedly, and whatever. But
and
yeah.
Also, I heard she was supposed to be Valeris in Star Trek 6, the Kim Cattrall, who I think was also a Vulcan Romulan, who was like behind the whole plot to keep the Klingons and humans.
Well, not Kirstie Alley, but Savick specifically, yes, was
right,
supposed to be.
Savick.
And I guess somebody pointed out, like, hey, people like this character. Let's.
Which would have been good if you had one of the good guys end up being the bad guy, because it's like, see that coming, and it's
Six is his own discussion, obviously, because it's such a good film. Which also I felt like as a kid I didn't get it, and as I get older now I get it more.
Yeah.
But I definitely understand like their reasoning, but at the same time it's clearly meant to be Savick. You see that sometimes. So like Deep Space Nine, there was a character in The Next Generation. I can't think of her name, but she was a Bajoran.
Oh yeah,
Ensign Ro, and then she goes away, and the character was supposed to be in Deep Space Nine, but the actress turned it down, and so they changed it into Major Kira.
Yeah.
And so you see that actually a few times in Star Trek, but the whole time you're just like, that's supposed to be Ro, right?
Yeah.
It's clearly even the haircut I think was similar when it started out.
And with Voyager, it was, Tom Paris was supposed to be the dude that
from Crusher's class,
Yeah.
the Red Stars or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that was over legal reasons though, because
Right.
the
Yeah.
writer owned the
Have your
character.
rights.
But yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you see that a lot in Star Trek, and just don't like they never quite. They pull a lot of Alan Moore's in Star Trek. But so yeah, but
Back to
it's
Rathacon. Sorry.
yeah, no, we're all over the place, and I
Keep
really should have I'm bad about making a list of what I want to talk about. But yeah, so the crux of this film really is about Kirk and Spock, and Spock is it's such an interesting journey. Like if you watch the first film, where it sort of reboots Star Trek for a lot of people,
hmm
but if you skip that film, this just falls into like sort of I think this is what people think of when they think of Star Trek. I don't think the original series, which was very loose and pulpy, whereas
Yeah.
this is a far more mature science fiction story. TOS was pretty wild. I mean, you
Right.
got Greek gods and stuff like that, but when people think of Star Trek, they really think of the movies, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of that really comes down to Wrath of Khan, because like Search for Spock, I don't particularly like, and I don't feel like a lot of people do. Um,
It's really underrated. Like I watched the three like within the last year, and by the three, like two, three, and four, like it's one of the original trilogies before that was really like a thing.
well,
And,
two, 3, and 4.
yeah.
I don't think that's technically a trilogy.
Huh?
Two,
I
three,
mean,
and
it's
four.
three movies that are like.
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, it tells the same story. You're right.
Yeah.
It does. You could argue it's a trilogy, definitely. And people hate 5, but they like 6. And I remember I rewatched 5 because I watched these. I skipped 3, but I watched 2, 4, 5, and 6. And I was watching 5, and I was like, why do people dislike this film? And then they started singing "Row, row, row your boat," and I was like, oh right, that's why people dislike this film. Uh, but yeah, so this is the crux of Star Trek is really Wrath of Khan, and because you get a lot of like classic Star Trek, like you get Ricardo Montalban as Khan, but you definitely get a sense of the dynamic of the different characters, and
Yeah.
and it really does what great films do when they're adapting previous material, which is boil everything down to what it is.
Right.
So you get Kirk as a little bit of a ladies' man, like not too much, but he's got a kid that he barely knows. You get Bones just being Bones, and you get Khan.
Yeah.
I just love this film. Like,
it really does. It captures like Kirk and Spock's friendship to where like I still do. If you put the movie on right now and you show that eulogy, dude, get the I get the little Native American tear running down my face when he
when he
when he gets
breaks up at
choked
the
up.
end. I think that's one of the interesting things to me is like I don't know if you remember when Lord of the Rings came out,
Mhm.
not the first one, but actually Return of the King.
Uh-huh.
People were going on about like there's like 9 endings to that movie,
Oh
and
yeah,
I was rewatching this again the other day in preparation for this. Yeah, I did do preparation. It doesn't show, but I did. And I was just like, man, like the ending of this is really good, but there are like 4 endings to this.
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
each little subset when he's talking to his son, and his son tells him he's proud of him, and the looking over at the new sky, and I feel young again. Like it feels like, oh wait, we forgot to include this,
Yeah.
and it just sort of tacks on. It doesn't ruin the film by any standard. All those little pieces are beautiful and perfect, but it definitely feels like it's not quite over yet. Like there's a little, because you really could just end it with the death of Spock in the funeral.
Well, they apparently added that in because they uh like they weren't sure. I mean, it was originally going to be Spock was going to be dead, and
Mm.
then that was it. And then they added in like that whole he's not really dead as long as we remember him, and like the voiceover with like showing the the coffin on the planet
Well, what
the
about the scene where he tells, he does the Vulcan mind meld and he says, "Remember."
that was added in too. Like that
Oh,
was
okay, it
that
was.
after the thing was filmed, and yeah, I think like someone came in and was like, no, we can't kill this guy. Like, we got to put this, and yeah, it was kind of like a last minute
Well,
add on.
I was also told that and it's interesting. We're so used to in the age of the internet things being spoiled before a film comes out or when it's
Right.
filming, but occasionally this would happen before the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of ours that John that works over at BSI Comics was telling me that supposedly there was a rumor out before the film that Spock dies in the film, and that if you watch the beginning of the movie with the Kobayashi Maru,
Yeah,
Spock dies, and Kirk says, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?" And he was saying, "Can you imagine, like in the days before the internet, when things just couldn't get out, like you hearing that rumor, and then you go to see it, and you're like, oh, they were screwing with me." And then at the end of the movie, they pull a fast one, and it's a precursor because you do get Spock's death.
yeah, that actually happened. Yeah,
So I mean that had to be pretty awesome to see in theaters.
yeah,
So you get different things going on. You also get, even though it's never explicitly stated, you have the parody of Kirk with his son who hates him, and then Khan's son who is utterly devoted to him, and one dies and the other lives, and there's a switch at some point, but you get to see those relationships. You know what I'm talking about? Like, did you get that, interpret that differently? I always assumed that was his son.
See, I remember thinking that when I was a kid, um, and
Because when everybody else dies, he doesn't say anything, but
right,
when the young guy dies, he holds him
but
and says, "You shall be avenged."
right, but when I watched it like later, I was like, well, it's only been 15 years, and this dude's not 15. Like he's not a kid. And then I remember like watching an episode of Space Seed, and like the dude's name is like Joaquin, but they pronounce it differently. There's like Joaquin
Joking.
or something. But there's a guy in Space Seed with the same name. He doesn't look like him. He's got like short black hair, but yeah, he's got the same name
Is your
as that.
dinner going off right now?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we?
Go get that, because like I'm hearing in the background. I'm like, huh?
And three, two, one. Yeah, and he had like black hair. There we go.
So what was?
Smooth transition.
I'm just gonna cut out the part where you were going. So wait, what's Space Seed?
Space Seed. Yeah, that was the episode
Okay, all right.
that Khan showed up in.
Well, I mean, at least spiritually, he's treated as a son.
Right. Yeah.
Although, I mean, you do make a good point, and he never does call him father. But I
Yeah.
always assumed that was like because he's technically captain of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking through some facts or supposed facts here. I have no way of verifying if these are true. I'm just looking on the internet,
I
but
can tell.
some of Khan's men were played by Chippendale exotic dancers.
Oh God, I wish.
I mean, that would explain all the oily chests.
Yeah.
Like, on a desert planet that dry, I guess it makes sense that they would have a lot of lube, but you'd have to stay moisturized. Creator Gene Roddenberry proposed a story where the Enterprise stops the Klingons from saving John F. Kennedy from assassination.
Yeah, Roddenberry actually didn't have much to do with Wrath of Khan. Like he was like really opposed to how it was going, and they just kind of, just kind of.
Well, but well, you're a TOS guy, so you probably feel differently. But I do feel like Roddenberry had a great idea
Mm-hmm.
and created a universe where you can explore a lot of themes, but he wasn't necessarily the best person to tell those stories. I think of him as like
Oh,
a
absolutely.
Walt Disney kind of guy.
Yeah. No, like it's it's a great world to live in, but it's not a world you want to go and watch, like for 2 hours or like an hour every week on TV. Like, you don't want to see the adventures of everyone getting along famously. You want to see, conflict and fighting and struggle. Like, it's a
Well, there's a story where, like, apparently he was one of the problems with Next Gen in the first seasons. Like,
yeah.
he decided, like, no one was allowed to have interpersonal relationships or any sort of conflicts like that, and that just created like this really sterile environment.
Yeah.
And then he died, and people were like, "All right, screw his corpse."
Yeah, and that's like I've always felt bad about saying it, but I mean, it did get better once they kind of just pushed him out the door, and
Which sounds sad when you put it that way.
yeah.
Fans angry about the death of Spock sent death threats to members of the production right up until the premiere. Robert Sallin got messages on his answering machine like, "You kill Spock and we'll kill you." Isn't Star Trek supposed to be like a beautiful future where humanity sort of comes together? I guess Trekkies aren't living up to that.
Oh, wait, are you saying that there are people in the world that like think one way but act another?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. Producer Harv Bennett had never seen an episode of Star Trek and thought the first movie was boring.
Yeah. I thought it was the writer, but yeah, it was someone that was like in charge of where the story was going, like had never seen the originals and just kind of like came up with the story. Yeah, for some reason I thought it was the writer, but maybe it was Harv Bennett, who was actually the admiral in Star Trek V at the beginning that Kirk's talking to when he comes back from singing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat" on the ship. Yeah.
Bennett felt the biggest problem with the first film was the lack of a good villain, so he binge watched the original series and decided Khan from the episode Space Seed was the perfect villain.
Sounds good.
One of the original script treatments had a young Vulcan man named Dr. Savick, and then they made her a woman and just called her Mr. Savick anyway.
Well, I mean, that's a military thing. Like, that was something that...
it's mentioned here, yeah.
Yeah,
it was never weird.
As a kid, but like I come from a military family, and they're like, yeah, that's just a...
Okay, so this one's interesting, and again, this might not be true, but Savick was crying during Spock's funeral wasn't in the script, and Shatner was furious since Vulcans can't cry.
Mm.
And then so maybe they came up with it later to explain. But I felt like throughout the film, she does have emotions. Like, she's pissed off that Kirk is the only person to pass the Kobayashi Maru, and she's like, well, what did you do? That's not very Vulcan.
Right.
Like, she's very concerned with her grade and what people think of her.
It's like her mentor dying. So, I mean, in the motion picture, like, Spock has a little tear when he's, like, talking about Voyager and so, like, I mean,
well, but he's also half human.
Right. But, I mean, it's like they still... Like, they have emotions. They just bury it because if they don't, then they blow their planet up. Like, that's kind of the Vulcan.
Or they start a fist fight in a pit.
Right.
And a fit fight.
And a fit fight.
Is there anything you don't like about the film? Not like dislike, but just like problems you have with it.
Right.
Because for me personally, I feel like it's a film that I can definitely like spot certain things and be like, that's a little bit off. But the weight of the film as a whole kind of buries any, to the point where you're kind of nitpicking.
No, they're real. I mean, even little things, that I would see, like just the Romulan ale that was like, it's 2283, and the movie takes place in 2284, and they're like, yeah, it takes a while for this stuff to ferment. It's like, well, that's only like a year, but then I guess like in future time, maybe things are, a lot of things that might be kind of nitpicky about stuff like that are it's 300 years from now. Like, things change, I mean, getting into like
Well, I don't want to get too nitpicky, just because, like, so like if you were gonna nitpick, you might choose something like the slug that goes into uh not Sulu, Chekhov's ear. Like, it's mentioned earlier in the film that it killed Khan's wife,
Right.
but it just like gives him a little headache and then crawls out. But are they gonna kill Chekhov?
Yeah. It's
You know.
there's some stuff where you just gotta be. It's not real. It's a fun thing that you're going to. Like it can't be such a literal. Well, why did this? And this wouldn't really. Well, none of it would really happen. We will never be able to travel at warp speed. It's just.
So you're saying that warp speed doesn't exist, that it's impossible? You're taking a definitive stand on warp speed.
Yeah, that is what I'm running my campaign on. No warp
So
speed.
Vernon Smith, 2020. We're not going to go where boldly anywhere.
Yeah, no warp speed, no space force. There's no,
I'm definitely not voting for you. I'm voting for Space Force 100%.
or there'll be no warp speed in space force. There.
I'm trying to think. It's like a lot of what I like about this film is just the maturity of it. Like, it's not necessarily. I mean, there are specifics, but like a lot of it's like specific moments. That's kind of what, like, I've been having trouble talking about the film, and I'm just like, I really like it, and I'm usually pretty eloquent about films,
Right.
but like for me, a lot of what makes it work are the details. Like the spectacles at the beginning of the film that come into play later, where Kirk, when he has to read the readout, he has to like pull it out, and he's kind of embarrassed, and
Yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's
Like you kind of
yeah,
around.
yeah. There's little
Yeah.
details that sort of make this film, but overall, it's like I keep using the word maturity because I feel like this is sort of the epitome of mature Star Trek.
Right.
I love other films. I love I've always loved Voyage Home ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Although that movie's a little goofier
Yeah.
by a lot. Uh,
Well,
not
and that's what kind of works with like the whole trilogy of 2, 3, and 4 is like they go together, but each one has like kind of different themes, and that just kind of bring because it's like the first one like Rathcon, like it has the fighting, it has the death, but it also kind of has like the him coming to terms with his aging, which was like addressed at the beginning of the film, gets wrapped up at the second one. The second one, I mean, the second one, Search for Spock, like it gets a little darker with like the destruction of the Enterprise, like they lose everything, and then the fourth one, it's a happy ending, and it's like, and it's more lighthearted because you just had 2 movies of just like come on, give us a break, and then like the next one, it's like it's the whole fish out of water, the wacky adapting to the the 1980s, and they get their ship back, and
well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the third one, like it's so overdone now, the destruction of the Enterprise.
right,
But like at the end of three, when the Enterprise is destroyed, like that was not a thing.
yeah,
Like one of the things I love about five is they're on this half-ass ship.
right,
They're still working things out. Like because there's a lot of good in five that people I feel
yeah,
like ignore. Like God's in it. Like, okay, well the Greek gods were in we're in TOS. Like,
yeah.
is it really a stretch?
And
Um,
what does God need with a starship? That's a great line.
that is
Like,
pretty memorable. Not as
I,
memorable as row 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 your boat, but why
yeah,
does God need a starship is pretty great.
right,
Um, but yeah, it's this. If they never made another Star Trek film after this would be enough.
right. Oh, and it's always the one if like no one has seen it, it's like, yeah, this is what you should watch.
Hmm. I mean,
Like,
I don't think I've watched one from end to end. I've seen all of it, but I don't. It's one of those films that I feel like I've caught in pieces over the years.
yeah,
And I'm not even saying it's a bad film, but it's definitely so foreign from. it almost feels like it's in an alternate continuity, including the costume design. Where Kirk's Sailor Boy outfit is it's very Sailor Moon. But
Oh my god, I never. Yeah, it is.
it is what it is. It was a different time, and that's what got Gene Roddenberry fired from his own franchise. Was Kirk in shorty shorts.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it's a bad movie. Even like I've seen interviews with like Nimoy, and it's a horrible movie. Like the soundtrack is great. That's one again. Like the soundtrack,
which later became the theme to Next Generation, which I didn't even realize until a couple of years ago, because again,
uh,
I haven't watched Star Trek the motion picture that often.
mhm.
Although I've heard that part of the problem with that film was like somebody suggested it should be more, or maybe when did it come? Did it come out? It came out after Star Wars, right?
Yeah,
I've heard it suggested that it was a reaction to Star Wars.
was
What?
yeah, because they were talking about like doing a TV series, and then when Star Wars hit and made Brazilians of dollars, like they
I
were just
love
like,
Brazilians.
all right, we've got this, and we it comes with a built-in audience, and people are into space, so let's put our thing that we have out, and they because like a lot of what they were gonna do with like the re like the it was like phase two they were calling it got put into the motion picture. Like Ilea was in it. They were gonna have like a different Vulcan, and then like some of that stuff also ended up getting used
They were
later.
going to have a child molester as the captain.
Right. Ew.
Seventh heaven. Anyway,
This, was he like convicted? Like, did he? I remember hearing the rumors. I don't know where it went from
I think
there.
he went to jail.
But
I don't know if he went to prison. I'll have to look that up. But it is interesting. Like, and then his co-star in Seventh Heaven ended up being the female lead in Voyage Home.
wait, what? Oh, yeah. Doctor, what's her face? Jillian Taylor, I think.
I don't remember. I
Yeah,
it's I love that film, but she's the mom from Seventh Heaven to me.
yeah.
So uh, but yeah, and I want to apologize to the audience. Like, you're a great guest, and obviously you know a lot about Star Trek. But I've been so dumbfounded over like how to explain this film. Just like I said, like it to me, it's more about the details and the themes, and that's sort of Star Trek in a way. Like Star Trek functions at its best when it approaches philosophy and society from an
Right.
intellectual angle, and that's like you asked me like why I'm not into Discovery, and it's just because it's a lot of new Trek where is look as much as I like the '09 film, I love Beyond, but they're not pure Star Trek. Like
Right.
there's no philosophy there. They're just well done remakes of things like this.
Yeah.
And I think the reason Beyond's so good is because it came from a Trekkie. Simon Pegg wrote that one.
Right.
I don't. No offense to Justin Lin, but I don't think the Fast and the Furious director. I don't think it was his brilliant mind that made this film work. But
Yeah.
not that he didn't have a lot to do. I mean, he's a director, um, but yeah, it's a little easier to talk actually about things like the voyage home, but even then when you get back to 6, which is also very heavy on philosophy,
Mhm.
and politics and stuff like that. Well, not politics and the specifics of right and left, but war and
Well,
peace and all
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's why I found it boring as a kid, because I was like, I mean,
Bang
CGI
bang.
blood aside,
Yeah.
three-footed, three-toed men aside, it was
Yeah.
pretty slow,
Yeah.
But anyway, but thank you for joining me, and I'll probably, like I said, I mean, not that I want to pigeonhole you as the Star Trek guy. Did you show
Yeah,
the
about
show?
that.
You haven't showed the shirt on camera.
Oh, I have not.
pretty great. Is that the cartoon version, by the way?
It's not, but I can't place what this is from because it looks really familiar. But I don't know what that drawing of Spock is from.
So it might have been from one of the comics too.
Yeah. And if it didn't show up on screen, if somebody's reading it, watching this on like an iPhone 4 or something, it's a quote from the Wrath of Khan Spock saying, I have been always shot here for.
If you've watched this and you don't know Wrath of Khan, like I don't know what you're doing with your life. Unless you just you do like me at night and like forget that you left YouTube on, you fall asleep to it and you wake up to random crap. You know. Like who are these guys?
That happens even if you don't fall asleep to you just leave it on and
that's part of getting older, you know. That's my little Genesis project exploding.
Yeah.
I feel young again.
I'm cool with being the Star Trek guy.
Well, I'll definitely have you back. And at some point, I might have to revisit Voyager of the Damned, which still exists on YouTube. The one episode that we did, which was basically a episode by episode breakdown of Star Trek Voyager, a film or show, which I used to hate. And then as I gotten older, I realized it's not that it's a bad show. It's that it's a show of unbelievably wasted potential.
Yeah.
Which comes down to Rick Berman.
I mean, also the time, like if it had been done like 10 years later and Battlestar Galactica hadn't been done, it would have been really awesome.
Well, Battlestar Galactica was done by the Deep Space Nine guys.
Yeah.
You know, it is unfortunately a reaction, and that's kind of the problem with the Star Trek franchise is something happens, the producer either it doesn't work, it's not super successful marketing wise, or the producers don't like it and they go, we got to go back to basics. So they're like, we're doing next gen. Let's introduce Deep Space Nine. Oh well, we don't like that. Let's go back to basics. So let's make another version of TOS and next gen. Let's do Voyager.
Yeah.
That didn't work. Let's go back to basics. Let's go with the Enterprise, but it'll be before Kirk. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let's just reboot Star Trek altogether and just go with Kirk and Spock on the Enterprise with a young crew. You know, and it's just on and on of like, it's people. There's too many people that don't get Trek that are in charge of it.
Right.
You know.
And that's why I'm curious to see where they're going with Discovery, because the end, like, I don't know how much of it you've watched, but
I've kept apprised of it. Well, from what I understand with season 3, they're doing what I said they should have done with season 1, which is just divorce it from old Trek, set it in the future, and then when you have like spore drives and all this crap, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to explain why the Klingons look complete, like they look like they've mutated, and then they have hollow generators that look better than the hollow generators in Deep Space Nine,
right?
For no reason, you know, like all that's explained by it's 1,000 years in the future.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll see. I mean, I think it could be the best thing for them, but they needed a guy like Brian Fuller, not necessarily him, but a guy that really got Trek to just be there and be in charge. And unfortunately, oddly, of Kurtzman and Orsi, you know, the conspiracy theorist that got in trouble was apparently the more talented writer of the pair. For those that don't know, Kurtzman and Orsi were a pair of writers that they were on Alias. They were a big part of J.J. Abrams' crew, and then they got put on Transformers. And then at some point, Roberto Orsi said something controversial. I don't know if he was a Holocaust denier or what, but like he said something. I'm not saying that's what he said. I'm just saying he said something, and people were like, "All right, you're done for the rest of your life." And this was before cancel culture. And then Alex Kurtzman became like this big Hollywood producer that produces everything, and often ruins it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I think the 1,000 years in the future thing, like 1 and 2 seasons of Discovery were good. It didn't feel like Trek. Like, it was different, but that's also not a bad thing because it's like I don't know. It's really kind of I'm really kind of torn on that because like yeah, you don't need to do. It's like all right, this week we're going to this planet, and oh, it's paralleling this that's going on in our world today. But then there were times where they did go to a planet, and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I've been missing. Like this is really cool, but you you can't just keep
Yeah, here's the thing. So Star Trek isn't a crew and it's not a ship. It's ironically it is a vehicle. It's a universe. And you can do whatever you want. You can have like action stuff like Star Warsy kind of stuff. What you can't do is connect it to the previous crew. So you can't
right.
have, this character that's like, oh, it's Spock's other sibling that no one talks about, which, is, yeah, they did it in five. They did
Yeah,
it in five and they explained it, but now like, oh no, there was another one. There's
yeah.
another one that no one talks about, and it's like, dude, you
Which
can't.
they wrapped that up. I mean, it was
Yeah, but that's let's be honest. That was like, oh, we got to throw something in at the end to
yeah,
explain why she never came up, and also why all this technology that we have like suddenly will never be used again.
yeah,
Even against like the Dominion or anything like that.
right,
Like they'll never touch it again.
yeah,
And that's fine. But like if they just hadn't connected it,
yeah,
I don't think you can say anything. You can say I don't like it. You can say I don't want anything to do with it. But like even people's problems with Voyager, it didn't interfere with like anything before it, and it
right.
grew out of it naturally. So I think that's you know
Yeah, because some of it is nitpicky, and it was the same with like Enterprise, where they were like, "Well, how come these aliens aren't around in TOS or Next Gen, and how come this was never mentioned?" When it's like, dude, it's the whole galaxy. You're not gonna know everything that everyone knows and that everyone has experienced and encountered. Like there's stuff just in the past 100 years that it's not common knowledge. I mean, FDR had an iPad. It's a fact. Like we just didn't get it until 10 years ago.
right, right. No, I liked Enterprise. I didn't stick with it just because I kind of I don't know hated UPN. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't stick with it. But I did feel like Enterprise they actually made an effort.
Yeah,
Like you can't recreate the look of the cheaper sets of the 60s. You can't.
right.
But they did their best to like dumb it down so it like okay, you could see how this would evolve
Yeah,
into those sets. Like they're less streamlined. They felt like they were based on old like Navy battle cruisers
yeah.
and stuff like that. And I feel like there was an effort with this. It was just like, all right, we need the iPad sets. We need, you know, whatever. but
Yeah.
but anyway, but that's a story for another time. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining me, Vern. Do you still have a website?
Yes, it is vernondraws.com.
Whatever happened to L. McPherson?
I don't know. It expired and I didn't do anything, so I just I actually I just kept I switched it over to Vernon Draws because I figured that was more of a general thing, especially when I was doing more like children's books and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It, it just seemed more of an
More
all.
appropriate for a parent to look up your work on Vernon Draws rather than L. McPherson.
Yeah,
I always like that name.
yeah.
So vernondraws.com so they can find links to all your stuff, your Instagram and all that.
Yep, I'm Vernon Draws on all that on Instagram, Twitter, which whatever I've posted like 10 times in the past 10 years. Facebook, DeviantArt, like yeah, all that stuff. It's Vernon Draws.
And once again, the book that's coming out is called Bigfoot Frankenstein. And
Yes,
so if you like comics and you have a local retailer, you can talk to them and see if it's in previews and if they can
it'll be
order
coming
from.
out through Action Lab Entertainment. That's the publisher, Action Lab Comics. Um, yeah. So and there's also BigfootFrankenstein.com, which is just a page on my regular website.
Mhm. As opposed to Bigfoot Frankenfurter.
Yeah. That takes you more to a
Hot dog joint.
yes, not a spinning of meat website from
Right.
15 years ago.
All right. So you heard it here, vernondraws.com. I'll probably put like links to stuff on here before I'm done with it, so you'll know where to find
Yay.
me. So thank you, Vernon, and thank you, audience, for sticking through my ramblings.
And my,
No, you were great. The whole time I'm just like, you need to start writing stuff down. You really do. Like, you're getting older. So, but that's the way it goes. And I don't have a sign off, so signing off.